Hello, everyone. Welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. My name is Ben Pearson. I am the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I am joined on today's episode by Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman
Hey, that's me.
and writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey, everyone.
All right, guys. So today's Wednesday. We normally do water cooler episodes on Wednesday. Peter's out, and Chris is having some Wi-Fi issues. So basically, we're just going to do a news episode today. We have not done an episode of the news since last Thursday's big emergency episode about Warner Brothers' big news about what they were planning to do or are still planning to do with its 2021 release slate and releasing all of that simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max. So HT, let's talk about the fallout from that, because that is a majority of what we're going to be discussing on today's episode. And you happen to write up a lot of stories about how Hollywood is reacting to that big news. So let's start first with Legendary Pictures, which is a producing partner of Warner Brothers. How are they taking this news?
Well, they're not happy, Ben. And I can probably sum up the rest of the stories in one sentence: that everyone is mad at Warner Media. But Legendary is the first to potentially take this to court. They have reportedly taken legal action against the company, or about to take legal action, sending letters of litigation to Warner Media over the release of their Warner Brothers films, Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune, to HBO Max day and date in both theaters and the streaming service. Legendary was notoriously unhappy with the decision, especially since they were reportedly only notified of the announcement on the day of, a couple hours before that game-changing announcement. So there aren't any details yet on what kind of litigation this will be, but Legendary provided 75% of the roughly $165 million net budget of Dune and put up a similar amount of funding for Godzilla vs. Kong. So reportedly they were approached by third-party alternatives like Netflix, who are willing to fork over $250 million for the streaming rights to Godzilla vs. Kong, but Warner Media blocked the deal. And in this case, they wouldn't be getting very much of that money back if Warner Brothers was to drop it day and date on HBO Max and theaters.
Wow. So the idea there is Warner Media blocked the deal because they knew that they were, going to include Godzilla versus Kong in this big plan. And so, I mean, it sort of seems like Legendary has the, I guess, the moral high ground here. Like they sort of have the right to be mad, right?
Yeah, they certainly are. They're getting basically copped out of a lot of money that they could be earning at the box office. Granted, it is the pandemic, and not a lot of theaters are open right now. And even with the vaccine headed on its way in 2021, it's not guesstimated that theaters will be full by any means.
Mm-hmm.
But Legendary put a lot of money into this movie, and box office returns are anticipated to help recoup those costs if they were to push it to a later date or even release it in theaters in 2021. But they were completely sort of blindsided by this announcement and not included in any negotiations about this new release deal. So yeah, they have every right to be mad.
Well, speaking of negotiations, let's talk about our next story here, which is that WB has managed to basically piss off every single entity and person in Hollywood with this decision. And I mean, some big name people here are pretty mad about this as well. Not only, like companies and business interests, but like individual, movie stars are not thrilled about this. So HT, tell us about that.
Yeah, especially these movie stars' agents who are scrambling to get their talent proper pay. So this comes from two reports from the New York Times and Hollywood Reporter, which give a glimpse at the behind the scenes sort of scramble that took place after the Warner Media announcement of the HBO Max day and date release. And it basically paints a picture of the agents fighting for the back end pay for stars such as Denzel Washington, Margot Robbie, Will Smith, Keanu Reeves, Hugh Jackman, Angelina Jolie. And all these agents want to know why their clients are being treated in a lesser manner than, for example, Miss Gal Gadot, who, like Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins, because Wonder Woman 1984 was given this HBO Max release before this whole 2021 slate. Warner Brothers approached them with this deal to pay them the amount that would be that they would be owed if the film were to hit theaters and make $1 billion, for example, what the projected amount that it was meant to pay, meant to earn. So Gal Gadot got her back end pay, which is the money that talent usually gets after a film is a big box office hit, and whatever like finances have gone to making back the budget and to theaters and everything, and the rest goes to the talent and the director. So Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins got this money up front because of this unique Wonder Woman 1984 HBO Max release. But because this 2021 slate was done without that kind of negotiations ahead of time, all of these people haven't gotten the Wonder Woman money that this deal is being called, and the agents are mad that they're big stars, and their talent isn't getting the pay that they were promised, essentially.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but essentially, and HD, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I think the way that this works is like once a movie at the box office hits a certain threshold, if it crosses $100 million, for example, there are normally deals built in where people get bonuses at that point. And now that this language has been, established in this whatever contracts that actually, I guess that's going to be the thing, right? Like how many of these people are going to take WB and HBO Max or whatever corporate AT&T, whatever corporate entity to court because of the language in these contracts, because they don't include any sort of a potential outcome of what actually happened here. Like this idea that these movies are now going to be primarily seen by people on HBO Max instead of in theaters means that there's almost no chance that these movies are going to hit that much at least domestically, at least for the for the short term, until, like you were talking about, a vaccine is like widely distributed and people are way more comfortable to return to theaters. So yeah, I mean, I can understand why everybody's mad about this. I wonder if this actually, do you think that this means that this deal came together very, very quickly, or do you think that Warner Media was just let's see, how do I put this? They met with Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot before Wonder Woman 1984 was announced to be the first project, the first major project, to be coming to HBO Max in this way. And then the rest of the floodgates opened, right? So I wonder if you think that this entire deal, this whole plan to release this 2021 slate on HBO Max came together in the interim, or do you think that they were just sort of that they did this on purpose so they wouldn't have to renegotiate or pay all of these people up front? What do you think about that?
I think it's a combination of both, because from the reports, it seems that most of these agents for the talent were left in the dark up until an hour and a half, 2 hours before the announcement was made. And Warner Media deliberately kept this announcement for the HBO Max release like under tight lid, so as to not leak it to the press, but also to essentially keep these negotiations from happening and from people to ask for the money that they're technically owed. Like Warner Brothers is basically reneging on these contracts that these stars and talent signed up with to begin with, and it's not good. And there's some of the notes in this report also says that a couple stars, especially for Dune, even took like some cuts from their upfront pay because of the anticipation for a higher box office return, and to cut down and to help with high production costs.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like they're probably like even more so in the upset about this
Yeah,
the
yeah.
circumstance, because like they took lesser upfront and are now not going to be paid the back end pay that they anticipated. So
Yeah, and it's got to be even more of a gut punch too, because of the way that Warner Brothers like went out of its way to shift the release dates and stuff, for so long, in the earlier stages of the pandemic before they finally sort of like I guess settled on this new plan. So it seems like they were probably like, okay, we're in the clear for a while until the floodgates opened. But
mhm.
man, yeah, that's I mean, I understand, for everybody out there listening, like we're not trying to empathize too much with like millionaires getting richer, but it's just on a purely business level. Like I understand that everyone is suffering right now, and like normal Americans are probably hearing us talk about this, or reading news stories about this and like scoffing that like people are getting quote unquote cheated out of the $1 million bonuses that they were going to get or whatever. But just in terms of like a seismic shift in the way that the industry works, and like how things are going to have to be negotiated moving forward, this seems like a pretty big deal. And I was listening to an episode of the Script Notes podcast that John August and Craig Mazin, the screenwriters, host, and they were talking about this a little bit. And Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl and the Hangover movies and a bunch of other stuff, was basically talking about how like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. He said, I think he said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't, if all these people are essentially just going to remain being screwed, because in their current contract language, it says, you only get these bonuses if these movies cross a certain threshold at the box office. And just because this pandemic happened or whatever, that's not Warner Brothers' fault that these movies aren't going to cross that budget. So I wonder, or cross that threshold. So I really wonder how all of this is going to end up shaking out, and like whether or not this is going to have a negative, like a stain on the reputation of Warner Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, this really funny line from the New York Times report says that some people have started to angrily refer to Warner Brothers as former brothers because it's until now Warner Brothers was seen as a studio that prioritized the talent, prioritized the creators, and here it seems that they are not doing so, and it has definitely put a stain, like you said, on the studio in its reputation with creators and filmmakers and with actors. And I want to say to your point about like the $1 million paychecks, bonus paychecks that we're talking about, and that has become such a source of contention for Warner Brothers. I do want to add that I saw a great comparison between this Warner Brothers situation and Spotify and how they pay their artists. And basically, it's as if like Spotify were to release, an album like straight to its streaming service and not pay the artist the money that
Mm-hmm.
they were owed if they were to like release it in a normal way.
Yeah.
And Spotify itself already has like a reputation for not paying its artists well. They pay like so many cents per stream,
Mm-hmm.
and so to we're basically defending like the rights of people who did the work to get paid, and criticizing a corporation, mega corporation, for not doing their part in paying their employees. So I think I just want to say that even though we are talking about $1 million paychecks, I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah.
I think
I'm glad that you said that.
plus one thing too is I know it's easy to scoff at celebrities, whether they're actors or professional athletes getting paid millions of dollars, when you could argue that their work isn't anywhere near as important as somebody like a doctor or somebody who changes or saves lives. But I think it's important to note that the status of a lot of these people is what employs thousands, if not millions, in a bunch of other jobs across the spectrum. Without someone like Gal Gadot in the role of Wonder Woman, you're not going to sell a bunch of Wonder Woman T-shirts or action figures or any amounts of merchandise. And the people that make those things don't have jobs if no one's buying them. And so there are so many things that are tied to the star power of these people and their drawing power outside of the box office, that the paycheck pays for all of this, for them to promote it, for them to be an image, to have these things be sold to people, and to represent so much more than just the movie itself. So like again, I don't want to be the one who's like, man, these millionaires really need money, but like this is what they get paid to do. That and that just happens to be how much they get paid to do it, and it does allow for a lot of other people to have jobs to get paid themselves.
Excellent points, both of you, and I'm glad that you both mentioned that stuff, because I would have just blithely moved on, but I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the trickle down impacts from stuff like this cannot be overstated. Like that, there are so many different markets, and yeah, just the effects are really astronomical there. So yes, it's not. It's. I think I was being a little bit. I don't know, glib in my statement there, but I'm just trying to, encompass the entire, the enormity of the entire internet's opinions in one podcast, which is a fool's errand, really. But Brad, tell us about how, or actually, HT, before we move on from you, how is AMC reacting to this? Because AMC Theaters, not the TV network, although I'm sure they probably have some thoughts too. But how is AMC Theaters reacting to this news?
Well, not well either. They didn't mince words in their statement responding to the Warner Brothers 2021 theatrical slate move, saying in a lengthy statement, which I won't read in an entirety, that Warner Media apparently intends to sacrifice a considerable portion of the profitability of its movie studio division, and it intends to go to aggressively pursue economic terms to preserve their business, and that they have already commenced an immediate and urgent dialogue with the leadership of Warner on this subject. So, and they were followed by Cinemark, which is the number 3 exhibitor in the world, also blasting Warner Media's decision, as well as Cineworld Group, which is the owner of Regal Cinemas, which was actually a little more muted in its reaction, believing that Warner's will look to reach an agreement about the proper window and terms that will work for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially the way that AMC reacted to the Trolls World Tour situation earlier this year probably shows that just a more measured approach, it might be the smart move in the in the long term here, considering they ultimately ended up sort of coming around to that mentality. I know it's not an ideal situation for exhibitors right now, certainly. And I'm frankly surprised that we haven't seen like a big press release from the National Association of Theater Owners. They're normally like, the second something bad in the exhibition community happens, they're normally like all over it with this big, a big press release, like decrying this from on high. But Brad, tell us how like smaller movie theater chains or independent theaters are reacting to this.
No, sir, they don't like it. Yeah, I mean, it's it feels repetitive, like we're beating a dead horse, but a lot of people aren't happy about this, and that includes the Independent Cinema Alliance. So, much like the National Association of Theater Owners speaks for big major theater chains and whatnot, there's also the Independent Cinema Alliance, which is a collection of volunteer people who run independently owned movie theaters across the country. And they expressed their disappointment in the situation as well. They called it a questionable decision. And, they understand that, these are unprecedented times, but they're also just, worried about how this lack of new material that's would normally be available exclusively in theaters will hurt the industry's hopeful comeback once the vaccine for the coronavirus is out there and people are ready to go back to movie theaters again. And so, like AMC, they too hope to be able to, strike good deals with studios so that they, get the kind of revenue that they are used to getting when they have movies in theaters. And, they want to collaborate with all the key players in Hollywood to make sure that happens. But it's definitely something that they are worried about. And, I mean, they really should be. It's the thing about this is, this is something that was probably inevitable because it's theaters and studios have been arguing about this for a while. And the coronavirus pandemic seems to have accelerated it. But when you have AMC striking deals with a studio like Universal to shorten theatrical windows, this was something that was going to happen across the board sooner than later anyway. So now it just comes down to how the negotiations shake out and how this is going to work. And it's like we talked about when the news broke is this will be something akin to, figuring out the new situation of when writers and directors weren't getting paid for any of the streaming views that networks were getting for putting shows online. So it's the next evolution of the industry, and we just have to hope that it doesn't hurt movie theaters, especially these independent ones, too much, because those are the ones that are really going to hurt in indie movies. And these prestige dramas and movies that aren't blockbusters that are already difficult to see because they normally don't get a wide release.
Yeah, I wonder if you guys think that the pushback here, the immense pushback. I mean, we've talked about one, two, three, four different articles that we've written in the past few days about, and there was one even about Christopher Nolan reacting to it. So there's more on slashfilm.com that we have not talked, that we're not talking about today. There's been a ton of pushback on this. I wonder if you guys think that negative reaction is going to, I don't know, have any sort of, is it going to fall on deaf ears, or do you think that this actually could amount to HBO Max, this whole deal actually only working for 2021 as the press release stated? I mean, we all speculated and sort of predicted like, oh, this is going to be more of the new normal going forward, once, into 2022 and beyond. But do you guys think that this negative reaction could actually mean that this is just a 1 year thing? Either one of you.
It's hard to tell, but I think that even if Warner Brothers were to just consider taking this beyond 2021, they would get a lot of pushback, not only in the press, as all of these people are doing and taking it to the media, but in the courts, because we haven't seen this actual litigation yet. And I'm sure it would play out over many months if any of these studios or agents were to go to court over these contract deals. And it would just cost Warner Media a lot more money than they would probably be willing to spend on this this hybrid model that is already a gamble at that.
So, HT, now that we've talked about this huge decision and its big fallout, what are the actual numbers looking like on HBO Max right now, as AT&T and Warner Brothers are sort of like sitting in the in the wake of this big announcement?
Yeah, the widely accepted assumption is that this Warner Brothers HBO Max release plan was put forward by Warner Media to give a boost to HBO Max after the botched release of the streaming service. And it's kind of worked. AT&T came to the defense of the release plan, citing the 4 million new HBO Max subscribers that the streamer has gained since September, which brings the service to nearly 12.6 million activated users, much more than the around 8 million activated users that was reported in a couple months ago. And this is they seem pretty optimistic about these new numbers, and it's nothing to sneeze at. It's a decent number, but in comparison to Disney Plus, which recently surpassed 73.7 million subscribers a year after it launched, it's still kind of on the low end.
Geez. When you put it right next to each other like that, that's a pretty stark difference.
Yeah, and 4 million new subscribers is a decent gain, but I don't know if it's enough to justify so much potential litigation happening and box office losses that Warner Brothers will inevitably suffer through.
Man, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, they're clearly going all in on HBO Max, and I wonder if these numbers are just low right now because these are only people who read entertainment news and absorb entertainment news in the earliest stages, as who are signing up right now, or like once let's say Wonder Woman 1984 actually comes on the service and people are like, oh, that movie's out now, how do I watch it? Oh, it means I have to sign up for HBO Max. I'm going to do that right now. I wonder if these numbers are going to see, a drastic increase as these films, starting with Wonder Woman 1984, start to actually roll out over the next year. I wonder, we'll have to keep an eye on that, because that seems like that's going to be where the real, the real consequences of this decision play out. Like, is this going to be worth it for AT&T, or is this going to be like a colossal blunder that completely upended Hollywood for quote unquote no good reason. We'll have to see. But I guess speaking of Wonder Woman 1984, Brad, tell us about the early buzz from that movie. What are people thinking about it?
People like it.
Great. All right, moving on.
No, it's the buzz has been overwhelmingly positive for the most part. Granted, this is only the first wave of press reaction, so there wasn't a large circle of critics who had seen it. I would say it was probably somewhere around a dozen, maybe a little bit more, that were a part of the first wave of social media reactions, including HT. HT, what did you think of Wonder Woman 1984?
Oh, I really enjoyed it, and it's a movie that really doubles down on all of the cheese, the compassion, and the heart that made the first one a success. And it is a bit on the lengthy side. It's like 2.5 hours long, but yeah, it's long. But I just had such a fun time watching it. It felt such a breeze to watch, especially for most of the 2 hours. I think the first like act of it is a little bit clunky, but it's just such a wonderful sort of much needed balm in this year, and one that really speaks to that kind of aspirational quality that I think that Wonder Woman represents, and bears some similarities to another sort of feel good major release that came out this year, which was Bill and Ted Face the Music. And I don't want to go too much into the similarities for fear of spoilers, but if you liked that feel good niceness of Bill and Ted, I think that Wonder Woman 1984 will definitely appeal.
Yeah,
Brad, I assume other people were feeling similarly.
Yeah, there's been a lot of the reactions have talked about just how uplifting and joyful the sequel is, in addition to having, the kind of superhero spectacle you want, also having, essentially what feels like a very classic Hollywood romance between Chris Pine and Gal Gadot, which is such a huge deal for her character because it brings back Steve Trevor from the dead. Which is something that a lot of people weren't expecting. And then, you have Kristen Wiig and Pedro Pascal also being praised for their performances as the villains Cheetah and Maxwell Lord. In particular, a lot of people are saying that Pascal is definitely hamming it up as Maxwell Lord, but that's kind of the point. He's even talked about it himself, saying that Gal Gadot brought the action and he brought what he called schmacting. So I'm sure he was having a lot of fun with this role. And it's there was really only like a little like touch of dissension among this first wave of critics, where they someone said they didn't like it quite as much as the first one, but otherwise it's a lot of great things to say about it. And so it sounds like on Christmas we'll all have a nice gift to unwrap.
Okay, so HT, very important question for you, but in the interest of preserving spoilers for people, I would like you to answer in one of three ways: yes, meh, or no. Here's the question. Did the Chris Pine subplot and like all of the logistics surrounding how he comes back and what happens to him, did that satisfy you?
Yes. It made me cry though.
All right. So that's good to know. I don't want to know anything about this movie going in. I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, December 25th in some theaters if you feel like going out and seeing it in the theater, and then on HBO Max, which is definitely how I will be watching it. Okay, let's move on to some Marvel news. A new report says that Alfred Molina is coming back to the Spider-Man universe. He is going to be playing Dr. Octopus, aka Doc Ock, once again. This news had the internet or Twitter at least a buzz yesterday, and I mean, we knew that the cast of Spider-Man 3, which is not the real name of this movie, it's the follow-up to Spider-Man Far From Home. We knew this was going to be a film that introduced the concept, or I guess built on the concept of the multiverse in live action, because Jamie Foxx's Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is going to be back. We also knew that Benedict Cumberbatch's Doctor Strange was going to be involved. So, the pieces were in place there for a lot of different versions and iterations of classic Spider-Man characters to make their way into this movie. And I suspect this is probably only the beginning. Like this news happened about Alfred Molina coming back, and then there was also some news immediately afterwards that that suggested that some other Peter Parker actors, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and maybe Kirsten Dunst, and potentially even Emma Stone might be coming back as well. So you can read all the specifics there in the show notes and the links that we'll provide. But I want to open the floor and see what you guys think about this. What do you think specifically about Alfred Molina as Doc Ock coming back? Brad, let's start with you.
Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite superhero movies of all time, and a big part of that is because of how great Alfred Molina is as Doc Ock in that movie. So I could not be more excited about this, especially because it just seems to be further leaning into the fact that we're going to be dealing with the multiverse and the likelihood of seeing several Spider-Men sharing the screen together if these deals happen to work out, which it seems like they will. This is one of those things where Marvel's definitely going to try and keep these secrets, much in the same way that they did when it was reported that Spider-Man was going to be in Captain America Civil War. Even when I did the set visit for Captain America Civil War and the news had been reported, no one would give in to the idea that Spider-Man was in this movie. They tap danced around it saying, we don't know if that's going to happen. That's been discussed, but we're not really sure. And it's like, it's sure. And so we don't know for sure for this, just because we're not privy to a lot of these behind the scenes dealings, especially with the coronavirus pandemic keeping things a little bit more under wraps without so much on location shooting. But this just it makes sense considering what we've heard about Doctor Strange's involvement and things that are happening with other Marvel properties, and it's the next big thing that they can do with Spider-Man to really make it an event movie. Especially since this is likely going to be the last movie where Tom Holland is officially part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, maybe, because when Marvel and Sony renewed their deal to share Spider-Man so that he could be part of the MCU, it was for one more Spider-Man movie and an appearance in another unknown Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, which some people have assumed is probably Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but could be something else. So this could be a big send-off to send him into a universe that isn't the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that way Sony can build their Spider-Man centric universe, which I forget what the weird convoluted name is for it. It's like Sony's.
I don't think there's a name yet, is there?
There is, and it's very clunky. It's like Sony's universe of like Spider-Man characters or something
something like that.
Yeah, it's something very very clunky. But they
what they should call it, the Dark Universe.
So they've got Morbius coming, and there's been talks about a bunch of other villains and side characters getting spin-offs, and I'm sure that they want to have Tom Holland have basically a clean slate over there. And this seems like the smartest way to do it, while also giving fans of the Marvel Studios movies something from the comics that they've wanted to see in live action for a long time. So it's super exciting, and I really hope that it works out.
Brad, something that you just said made me wonder, and I know we've speculated about Miles Morales, that character maybe coming into the MCU at some point, but the way that you just described that, the idea of like potentially this Spider-Man 3 movie ending with Tom Holland's character getting sucked into a portal over to Sony movies, that seems like the perfect opportunity to introduce a live action Miles Morales and have him, immediately pick up where Tom Holland left off, doesn't it? Do you think that that's a possibility here, or do you think they'll hold off on introducing Miles in the MCU for a while?
I don't know. It's definitely a possibility, and it would be a way to do it without having to recount the origin again, especially since they've already started to tell Miles Morales' story from the beginning with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So you probably don't need to retread that territory so soon after that movie came out. And we already know kind of like what the legacy of Spider-Man is, even if Miles Morales is a completely different character from Peter Parker. So if there was a way for Peter Parker to, somehow enter Miles Morales' universe and Miles Morales to swap for whatever reason, it would be a good way to bring in Miles Morales into the MCU easily, much in the same way that Captain America Civil War introduced us to Black Panther without giving him, a regular origin story, as it were. So, so I think that's something that would be very cool. I just wonder if it's something that they're able to pull off, especially because no matter what, Sony still has the rights to Spider-Man. So I don't know if Marvel would easily be able to pull Miles Morales into the MCU as a trade for Peter Parker if Sony still wants to use Miles Morales.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. They have, I think they have access to something like 600 Spider-Man characters or something like that over there. So yeah, I wonder if Miles is technically a part of that roster. I'm sure he is. So, HT, before we end today, I want to present this question to you. Do you think that the introduction of Alfred Molina and all of these, other Spider-Man universe characters, do you think it's going to overshadow Tom Holland as Spider-Man? Like the kid has never gotten a pure sort of low-key Spider-Man movie. He's always been. I saw somebody on Twitter point this out. Like, Tony Stark has always been there, or he's been in an Avengers movie, or Mysterio rolled in, and there's just there's always something that is. It seems like Marvel and Sony just can't let Tom Holland lead a Spider-Man movie by himself. It's almost like they don't have enough faith in him or that this version of the character will be able to lead a story like this. Do you think that he's going to be overshadowed in this movie if they continue to add, tons of other characters from Spider-Man's backstories all over the place?
Wow, Ben, you read my mind.
Oh,
Everything
really?
you just said, I had noted in my Spider-Man piece about the Peter Parkers coming back because I'm a big sucker for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man 2 is also one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. I love Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. I think his tragic Shakespearean take on the character is so, so good. And I even have an affection for Tobey Maguire's weird, nerdy Peter Parker. And I just think that I just feel bad for Tom Holland because he's always been in the shadow of some other character or being mentored by some other character. First, it was Tony Stark in Spider-Man: Homecoming, and also in his introduction in Captain America: Civil War, and
Mm-hmm.
then in Far From Home, it was Mysterio, and it feels like he has always been almost a supporting player in his own franchise, and that at best and a plot device at worst, because first he was used to in the Civil War to like introduce, I don't know, Spider-Man and more twists to that story, and now he is essentially being used to introduce the multiverse in a way. And Tom Holland, really charismatic, really talented little actor. I can't say for like I can't really associate, not associate, I can't really connect with all my other fellow bloggers of the same age as me who are like thirsting over this young boy. I guess it's fine, but he's a
He's
child.
like 20 something, I
Whatever,
guess.
he's a
So
child, he's a baby. Anyways, I do feel kind of bad for him because I feel like he's such leading man material, and he's often just been kind of shunted to the side in favor of doing all this world building and legacy building and stuff. And that was one of my least favorite parts about Far From Home. Actually, I really disliked how it was this globe-trotting thing. It didn't feel very much like Spider-Man until the end credits when you see him back in New York, and I was like, wow, I miss this part of Spider-Man.
mhm.
So yeah, I'm excited for like these characters because I'm nostalgic. Nostalgia's a disease, whatever. But I'm excited to see them again. But at the same time, yeah, I feel bad for Tom Holland, and he has a passion for this character despite him not really being able to show it and take it on his own in these films.
Yeah, I guess the hope for me would be that all of these cameos that they're talking about are only going to be featured maybe in one scene where he somehow like, peers in through another dimension or something and like sees a bunch of different versions of past Spider characters and maybe has like some brief interactions with them. And it's not like a full blown Back to the Future Part 2 or Avengers Endgame scenario where like he enters their movie or like pulls them out of an action scene that they were in the middle of and incorporates them into their world. And it's like a whole thing. I would much rather these be like just a small thing so Tom Holland can kind of have some of his movie to himself. But yeah, I think you make a lot of good points there. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But yeah, I'm guessing this is just the beginning in terms of the cameo stuff that's going to be rumored or announced over the coming months. So we will be covering all of that at slashfilm.com. You can find more about all of the stories that we mentioned on today's show at that very website and linked inside the show notes of this episode. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting. Well, it's not anymore. We really should change this this text here. It's like 3 times a week now, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find at the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps, and send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Please also rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you guys, I think, tomorrow maybe for a water cooler. If not, then definitely on Friday for another Mandalorian episode.